Blog Talk Radio.
I saw a cloud today. I watched it change its shape into a dinosaur, a whale, a mermaid, and a plane. The mermaid was pregnant, and then it turned into a Doberman, and the Doberman just turned back into the sky. Then I saw a real plane flying awfully low, man, dropping toxic chemicals all over my town. It says to help us, but they're just trying to hold us down and try and take away our clouds and replace them with their own crop dust in downtown. They say it's the ozone, but they don't care about your home. They're just trying out new ways of population control. We're young and we're bold. We can throw away their laws and replace them with our own. And the story will be told about the group of young adults who overthrew the throne, shone a light on just how bright this world could surely shine. Utopia works conceptually, but even in reality, to overthrow the state, we all gotta be in the right state of mind. I saw a bird today, I watched it fly away, and in my heart I knew I had to do the same. This town's really gotten to me, the streets smell rotten to me, and I still can't stand those goddamn fucking planes. But they're only flying now, someday they'll be bombing towns. They already started a secret chemical war. They've taken all we had and still want more. The sky is saturated with rain, I swear I'm not insane. It's going to pour, it's going to pour. So don't you use no phone, because the government can bug anybody's home. So don't walk the streets alone, because they might steal you in the night without your family being told. But we're young and we're bold, and we can throw away their laws and replace them with our own. And the story will be told about the group of young adults who overthrew the throne, shone a light on just how bright this world could surely shine. Utopia works conceptually, but even in reality, to overthrow the state, we all gotta be in the right state of mind. We all gotta be in the right state of mind. There's no telling just how far we can climb if we're just in the right state of mind.
Hello, everyone, and thank you once again for tuning in to Universal Truth Evolution Blog Talk Radio. I am your host today, Jerry Avalos, taking you on an interesting little journey down the path that we all know exists, although major media may not want to admit it all the time. But that's why we talk about this kind of stuff here on Universal Truth Evolution. So, with that in mind, our scheduled guest today is Stephen Bassett of Paradigm Research Group, active exopolitical figure who is working on the disclosure process, not the disclosure project. That's a different Steve. We're trying to get in contact with Steve right now, and we'll see what happens here in a bit. And let me just check and see if this is actually Steve right now. Give me a second, everyone. Hello, Stephen, is that you? Hello. I'm guessing that that's probably not Stephen. So, anyways, we're expecting Stephen on at any time, and I'm actually probably going to just go ahead and dial out here and see what's going on with our good buddy Steve, because we all want to hear from him about all of his great work with the X Conference and all of his endeavors over the years here. And So we'll see how this goes. And while that's ringing, there's plenty of things to talk about. We can keep going until perhaps we hear from Steve or one way or another. And
you've reached Paradigm Research Group, Stephen Bassett. Please.
And all right, at one point we'll probably have Stephen on. Let me just this caller here too. Hello, Stephen, is that you? Let's see. Apparently not. So, anyways, we'll be waiting to hear from Steve here at some point. Until then, if anyone wants to call in for any reason, by all means, or if you have a question or if you want me to blah, blah, blah about anything in particular, until we hear from our guest here, by all means. There's plenty of things to talk about, as I mentioned earlier. There's quite a bit going on in the world, and there's a lot of questions, and especially considering stuff like the bird die-off and as such. And actually, I guess there was another posting recently of at least 300 more birds dying off in Alabama, and I'll be posting that link in the chat room for those who want to see that who maybe haven't caught it yet. So it's kind of interesting that these things are all kind of happening and coinciding together, and as we know, that nothing's truly a coincidence. So we have to just mark these down in our categories of correlations, because that's all we can really do. It's not wise to necessarily jump to conclusions right away without getting all the facts. And the facts are, we don't really have too reputable of a source that has given us transparent autopsy data on any of these animals that have decided to depart from Camp Human. So basically, let's just, like I said, file this away in the Coinky-Dink file, shall we? And see what happens. We do have a caller here. Let's see who this might be. Hello, caller. You're on the air. Truth.
Yeah, this is Steve Bassett.
Steven.
Do you want? I believe you want to have me on this afternoon, and I think we want to do this by phone, or do you want to do it by Skype?
Either way, actually, technically we're streaming live right now, so whatever's more convenient for you. I'm just kind of blah blah blahing for a little bit here. So.
No, if this phone connection is good, can we go with that?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. All right. Fantastic.
Awesome. So we are absolutely glad to have you on, Stephen, and it's an honor, truly. So thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, for those who maybe aren't familiar with you in our chat room or in the archives, maybe you can just give us a little quick bio, because I know you have quite an extensive list of accomplishments. So just however you feel could kind of sum you up.
Well, quickly. As many of your listeners probably know, I entered this field in 1996. I created an organization called Paradigm Research Group, which is not a research organization. It's an advocacy organization. It's called Paradigm Research Group because the first thing that PRG did was register with the U.S. Senate and Congress and the White House as a lobbyist. Some people think lobbyists are bad. Well, there are good lobbyists and bad lobbyists, and there are good issues and bad issues. And I registered on behalf of a number of research organizations, ufology groups, and so that's where the name Paradigm Research Group came from. And for the last 15 years, the Paradigm Research Group has had one goal, really, and that is to end the truth embargo that was imposed for national security reasons by the United States government back in the very late 40s and 1950s, early 1950s, to prevent a formal public awareness and acknowledgement of the extraterrestrial presence that's engaging us, for which the proof now is overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Very similar to what the Catholic Church did, because they were uncomfortable with the new science of the solar system back in the 14 and 1500s, and they attempted to suppress the truth of that from their constituents in Europe. For whatever reasons, of course, that ultimately failed. Is this current truth embargo will fail? But we live in a more dangerous and more complicated world now, and so it's far more risky for the state or for a religious organization to deliberately misrepresent reality to the people than it was maybe 300 years ago or 400 years ago. And so this embargo, which did have a national security basis in the early days and throughout the Cold War, is now a liability, perhaps even an abomination. And so the goal of PRG is to help build a worldwide network of activists and a movement, which is often referred to as the disclosure movement, to end this policy. And I think the number of people in the world that are quite eager to see that is growing every single day. So that's what I do. It's that simple. I'm a political advocate for disclosure of the ET presence to the world's people.
Awesome. I think your endeavors are much needed in this world, and I think I'm sure go far underappreciated. So,
but let me tell you something about activists. All right, political activists are a pain in the ass when they're wrong, and they often are. But when they're right, they're an even bigger pain in the ass. So nobody who gets in the political activism business should expect people to be throwing rose petals in front of them, or to be universally loved. It's not that way. It's the fundamental nature of activism is ultimately to tell people something they don't want to hear but need to hear, or to ask that people do something they don't want to do but very much need to do. That is the nature of activism. It's a tough gig. Usually when it's over, when you've succeeded, most everybody wants you to go away immediately and then be heard from again. So what can I say? I understand the rules, and hopefully we'll still get this done, and hopefully there'll be a place for some of the activists in this movement in the post-disclosure world, but that remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe you can do the rose petal theme for the next X conference, so you guys can finally get the appreciation. But actually, on that subject, maybe we can talk a little bit about X conference and how long that's been going on, and what any new developments.
Well, there've been 6 X conferences. They were the first conference set up to be an exopolitical conference, the first one of that specifically for that focus. Mm-hmm. And the first one was in 2004. There've been 6, and the idea was let's hold this conference in Washington D.C. so that it makes it harder for the political press and the political leadership to beg off. I mean, they're not going to come anyway, but I mean, it makes it a little more embarrassing than to say no. Though we have had the odd member of the press turn up, we've had some staffers turn up. But it certainly has gotten coverage, and it brings the issue right to Washington, which ultimately this is where the policy is going to have to change. I mean, people say, well, Washington doesn't matter. Well, I beg to differ. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, that one time they had a policy of draft. They could draft you to serve in the military, and it wasn't like, oh, well, gee, we just won't do that down in Tallahassee, or Lubbock, Texas, because the Washington doesn't matter. Oh, it does. And you got drafted, and they sent you overseas. And so there are plenty of things that must take place in Washington for the country to advance. So it's not exclusively that. And this one, is one of them. Mm-hmm. The fact that there are some nice people in Phoenix that already know the ETs are here is fine, but in terms of the implication of that to government policy and what's going to happen in the U.S. and the world with respect to this issue, I'm afraid it doesn't carry a lot of weight. And so we brought the issue to Washington through the X conference, and I think it's had something like 86 speakers and 135 presentations over the 6 events. Nice. The last one was actually held in the National Press Club, a couple of blocks from the White House. But they all lost money. It's just extremely difficult to break even, and they all lost money. And the last one, I took a big gamble on because I knew the economy was fading fast and that people were starting to get really scared, but I thought perhaps that I had put together something that might still fly. And unfortunately, it lost 35,000. So PRG is essentially $35,000 in debt, and until I can raise money to cover that, any future X conferences are on indefinite hold. But that's been the nature of this from the beginning. One of the fundamental successes of the truth embargo, as it was put together by the government, was in addition to pretty much making sure that no colleges or universities would teach the subject, that no major press, particularly back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, would cover the subject or report it properly or investigate or give the government any kind of a problem. They were also very, very successful in making sure that the philanthropic organizations and grant institutions would not fund it at all, would not fund the research, the activism, or anything else, and also intimidate or at least, ridicule, create enough of a sense of ridicule that private citizens wouldn't fund the activism. Now, the Catholic Church, went further. I mean, back in the 1500s, if you wanted to pursue the Copernican revolution, you could expect to be burned to the stake or simply killed or put on the rack or whatever, right? Yeah. So we don't do that anymore. But they were able to successfully sort of convince people that, you don't want to support this advocacy because we don't want this embargo to end. And so it is incredibly difficult to get people, even those who are absolutely convinced that the ET presence is real, to actually fund the advocacy work that needs to be done. And so the embargo is now in its 65th year, or is it 60? Well, informally it's 64th year, going back to Roswell and the Ramey decision to reverse the saucer article. So the announcement, the press release on the saucer, and turn it into a weather balloon the next day. They've been able to do that, and that's the principal dilemma and obstacle to this work. I can live with the fact that the universities don't teach it. Eventually they will, and they will have a hell of a lot of apologies to make. And we're making progress with the media. We are getting more stories. We are getting more coverage, though it's slow coming. And I understand that the Congress can't deal with it, but then the Congress can't deal with anything. So in a way, I don't take it personally. But what's toughest is that, we're the wealthiest nation in the world, and we have, all kinds of people with enormous wealth, and none of them will support this advocacy work. That is the toughest thing for those that are trying to get this resolved.
Yeah, I bet. And, there's just that big social stigma put on the subject in general, and I think it's interesting though. I think because obviously all of your efforts have given rise to movements like even the universal truth evolution in a lot of ways. So it's just a matter of time, like you're saying, and that's too bad about the X conference though, because you always had such a great lineup and there's always a lot of information that came out of those. So is there like any other endeavors that you're thinking about doing in the meantime, like having like roundtable discussions or anything like that?
No. PRG was completely wiped out financially by that event. I'm trying to possibly get a lecture series going in the UK. Right now I'm in Los Angeles, see if I can make some connections with some of the multimillionaires here who have made absolute fortunes off the extraterrestrial subject. There's about a dozen ET-related films in the works right now that will be coming out this year. A couple of television shows. So they continue to milk the issue for billions of dollars. Avatar 2 and 3 are both in either pre or production. Each one will probably do $1 billion or more. But Hollywood will not fund the advocacy. In other words, everybody's being the good German. In other words, the government is imposed a fundamental lie on the Republic, and everybody's going along with it. Like, I just don't want to rock the boat. And there's consequences to this embargo. And the consequences are growing. Lives by the hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, are being lost.
Yep.
This is part of my presentation when I present. The truth embargo, I think it can be very well established that the truth embargo on an ET presence, particularly since 91, has already cost the lives of millions of people. And people say, that's impossible. What are you talking about? Well, if you actually look at it and you examine it carefully and you realize the implications and you start to see how and what could have happened, what could be done, if we had solved this matter, you start to see where those lives are being lost.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention the fact that the truth embargo is helping to erode virtually confidence in our government to points that are just beyond the pale. We're seeing a fundamental breakdown in governance in America at every level.
Mm-hmm.
I can assure you that Tucson is only the beginning. You're going to see a lot more Tucsons. You've got states on the verge of bankruptcy. You've got cities on the verge of bankruptcy. The nation itself is bankrupt. There's going to be more mass killings and shootings. There's going to be riots. Governance is literally breaking down in America. Nobody trusts anybody. The conference trust level right now is running around 11%. It's probably higher than that in Somalia. And so the country's really coming apart. And one of the reasons for that is that for 64 years, the United States government has been promulgating the biggest lie in all of history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Bigger than the Nazis cooked up, bigger than anything the Soviets came up with. They are saying to their people, there is nothing going on in your skies. There are no ETs coming into your bedroom. The crop circles are all made by Doug and Dave. All those surgical removal of tissues from the animals is all done by wolves who happen to have, mastered laser technology. And you're alone in the universe. I mean, this is a lie of such a magnitude that it is really hard to describe it in intellectual terms. Now, again, it was justifiable in context of the Cold War, which in itself was a massive, colossal human catastrophe. And God knows the history of the human condition is how can we make bigger catastrophes? Mm-hmm. And so they conducted a Cold War, which killed tens upon tens of millions of people, maybe even more, spent $15 to $20 trillion down the drain, wasted, set off thousands of nuclear explosions, which have helped drive the cancer rate from about 1 in 9 to 1 in 3, soon to be 1 in 2. The Cold War was a catastrophe. But, let's face it, the Soviets hated us, we hated them. We built the bombs. And so with all of those bombs being built, it was hard to, even for, logical, good-hearted, well-thinking people in the national security structures, to be able to vote yes on bringing that information out. They said, my God, it'll destabilize the situation and some fool will launch a ballistic missile. Okay, fine. Well, the Cold War's been over for 20 years. And so the abomination of the Cold War was the justification for the abomination of the truth embargo. So the Cold War is over, the truth embargo goes on. So now all we have is abomination. The truth embargo is basically a violation of natural law. It's kind of like, people say, what's natural law? Well, let's say that you decided one day that you just wanted to go out and kill kids. Just go shoot them on the street. And somebody say, well, if there was a law that said you could do that, then it would be legal. It would be okay, right? But I think any reasonable person would know that there is no law, any government, state, city, kingdom, or anything else that could pass that would be acceptable, because such a law, regardless of its, quote, institutional legality, would violate a higher law, a natural law, that you don't murder children. There's no justification for it. Well, the truth embargo is in that category. Ultimately, there is no law that any entity could pass that could justify the misrepresentation of reality at this level. It violates natural law. And so in that sense, it's fundamentally corrupting. And this truth embargo in its 64th year has been eating away like acid at the American social contract, and to some degree the social contracts of the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia, and other nations, but particularly us, particularly the U.S. And, and the truth embargo itself helps prevent the average citizen from watching CNN and Fox News and MSNBC and the news and putting it together. I mean, because the truth embargo, they don't understand what's going on with that, and so they don't see the connection, but there is one. as they watch their nation unravel in front of their eyes on their own television. The message they need to hear, which if it wasn't for a truth embargo, they would be hearing loud and clear, is that the truth embargo itself is playing a significant role in the unraveling of the American social contract. Just like, in a sense, the effort by the Catholic Church, not only to suppress the Copernican Revolution, but to suppress thinking in general through the Inquisition, helped to unravel the power of the Catholic Church and ultimately diminished it substantially because it was a violation of natural law. And so we're making the same mistake all over again. And so the question is, who is going to step forward and stop this? Who is going to put the money up? Who is going to stand and publicly state this is wrong? This is the question before us. And this is the goal of Paradigm Research Group and its colleagues and advocates around the world. When are we going to stop this lie? It's time to know the truth that we are not alone in the universe. I'm not putting, I'm not endorsing every theory out there about ETs and all of the vast speculations that go on and all of the number of theories and alleged programs. No one can do that, and I'm not doing that. I'm simply stating that there's extraterrestrial here, which in itself is more than enough to command our complete and total attention without getting into the particulars. And so until we acknowledge that, we're never going to sort this out. And so one of the other consequences of this truth embargo is you've got huge numbers of people all over the world who, in the absence of resolution of the issue, in the absence of the proper information, are just running around in circles like a dog chasing its tail, unable to really get anywhere, wasting their life and their time and their resources, right, chasing up blind alleys and false theories and ridiculous speculations and disinformation, just being run around in the truth vacuum created by the truth embargo. And that's another, to me, violation of natural law, that the state could create a situation where people literally waste their lives pursuing chimeras that the state has created. These are things that are going to have to be addressed pretty soon, let me tell you. Or there's going to be some pretty damn significant consequences for this country and everybody that lives in it.
Yep, absolutely. I think that, and you couldn't have said it better as far as like how this issue really does affect everything. I mean, because at its core, it is the biggest issue. Like everything else sort of falls into place. Like especially when some of these technologies that are embargoed along with this become more available, like some of the free technology, free energy tech, as well as applications in the healing fields. So yeah, it's huge, and I totally understand what you mean by the millions upon millions of lives that have been sacrificed in a sense due to this embargo, and that's so true. And maybe you can elaborate on the term exopolitics itself, because that's one term that I know personally I like to try to get into everyone's lexicon to understand that's the bridge between all of this and day-to-day crap and the real deal.
Well, I think it is. Almost all social progress involves changes of terminologies involving lexicons. The Civil Rights Movement had its own language, all right? The women's rights empowerment movement has its language. The era of the UFO, which was at its heyday in the, I think, the late 50s and 60s, with a bit of a resurgence in the 80s, the era of the UFO ran from about 47 to 91, and it was the science of it all. It was the efforts to try to scientifically explain it. And then the government would go, oh, okay, you figured it out, wonderful. Okay, yeah, you're right, something like that. And but of course the government already knew the ETs were here, and so it wasn't about that at all. It was about the political policy of embargo. And so one of the key tools of the truth embargo, highly effective, was a concept that I refer to as intellectual ghettoization. They ghettoized the issue by building a wall of ridicule around it, and then that would serve to separate the issue and everybody involved in it from the rest of the people. from the institutions, the press, and the universities, and the funding, and all the other things. In other words, you don't talk to those people, you don't help those people, you don't hang out with those people, because they're in that UFO ghetto. And the target, the principal target, I say the target, the focal point of the ridicule campaign was the acronym UFO, and by extension, ufology. So once you've associated that acronym and that term to the ridicule program, then that's it. So you literally, the field was faced with a dilemma. Either it completely abandoned that acronym and that term, or accept its ghettoization. And there just wasn't a term. They tried, unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, and all that. They came up with trying different names, but it was hopeless. It was all pretty much solid. Mm-hmm. And so exopolitics, the reason for the term was that we're no longer in the era of the UFO. The ufology has already proven itself many times over. There's an extraterrestrial presence. So we're in the area of resolving the issue, of ending the political process. This is a political decision. It's not a scientific decision. And so exopolitics is obviously a term to address that. Right? Now, interestingly enough, I find this amusing, as we've come up with the new lexicon, disclosure, truth embargo, exopolitics, politics of disclosure, right to know, so forth, these kinds of terms, the government, oddly enough, which is really in a different phase now. In other words, the truth embargo is in a different phase. It's not being practiced nearly as intensely as it was between 1950 and 1990, though it's had its moments. Interestingly enough, the ridicule and the attempt to ghettoize the terminology is now not coming from the government. It's coming from the ufology world. In other words, they're not happy with this transition, and so they're trying to ridicule and demean the terms and the people involved and literally create a ghetto around them in order to isolate them. What can I say? There's nothing surprising about this. It's not surprising at all that citizens often emulate the actions of the state. They figure if they work for the government, they'll work for us. Okay, fair enough. So, but the fact is that the resolution of this issue by political means will be the answer to this, and the terms and the language that we've built, I think, is the correct language. And so exopolitics is the umbrella term. Disclosure is the principle of exopolitical process right now. It's a movement, a political movement. The truth embargo is the fundamental focus of the disclosure movement, ending it. All right? Mm-hmm. All of these things, I think, perfectly apply to the situation, and so these are the terms which are going to emerge and have longevity. Ufology, of course, will not be forgotten. I mean, ufology and UFOs and all that will have a very long history, and it will be intensely investigated. And I believe, and I certainly will do my part, that the pioneers of ufology and the researchers from the 50s onward will go down in history, and they will have a very substantial legacy.
Oh, absolutely.
And if they're alive in this world, I think they will be acknowledged in their lifetime for those that can stick around long enough.
Yeah, I think so too. And I've said here on the show before that all of the researchers in ufology right now will essentially turn into historians and experts on particular technology, really, as will happen after disclosure, shall we say. And here's one question that I have is, in terms of, like, I'm sure you meet a lot of contention out there, being an activist of sorts, especially on this subject, of those who just really, like, by no right, because they've been subject to all of the programming that goes along in this modern society, they just don't know about this. Is there something in particular you like to point people to that says, hey, here's some evidence for you, those who don't know any better? Like, is there anything in general you just like to look at that?
All right, look, I'm going to answer your question, but first let me finish up what I was saying before. There's something I wanted to add.
Please,
yes. Just to put things in perspective, on January the 23rd to 26th, there was a conference in Saudi Arabia called the Global Competitiveness Forum. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And they will have this panel. The people that are attending this forum in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, are paying $4,000 a pop. And they will have a panel on it called Contact, Learning from Outer Space, that will include Michio Kaku, Stanton Friedman, Nick Pope, and Jacques Vallée. And so I think you can see that while the truth embargo is still in place, major cracks are starting to occur. And so I think this is a positive thing, very positive thing.
Yes.
I'd give my right arm to be there. In any event, look, there's two things I'll say about this. First, my attitude from the beginning, well, first of all, this is not a religion and this is not a cult.
Mm-hmm.
It's an advocacy movement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And an advocacy movement should fundamentally be about information, informing, and not persuasion. I understand the power of persuasion. But particularly in these times, I find the more you try to persuade somebody, the more resistance you get. Mm-hmm. So that my job is to bring the information forward, and people will get it when they get it, right? And not everybody's going to get it at the same time. And that's okay, because everybody is different. Everybody has a different life. They have a different education, a different knowledge base, different problems in they're facing. And so the idea that everyone's going to sort of, the light bulb's going to go off in their head at the same time is, of course, ridiculous. And so fundamentally, the first thing I say to people is, look, you'll get it when you get it, and it's okay, right? Sure, I would love millions of people to get on board tomorrow, millions and more than yesterday, and I'd love them to get on the advocacy train and start funding this work, and we just all sail into the future together. I'd love that, but that's just not the way life is. In terms of those that are wanting to get it, well, look, here's the deal. There's about 5,000 books published now on this subject matter, and thousands of more journals and articles. The total number of newspaper articles, including now I guess you would call internet articles, mainstream press, mainstream media, right? Newspapers, radio and television and what have you. Since 47, I think easily exceeds 20,000, might even be 25,000 articles. So a proper study of this field is a 4 to 5 year project, maybe 10 years. So wait a minute. So what, my God, do I do if I... Well, here's the deal. Usually in any situation like this, there's 4 or 5 books of relatively recent origin that if you read them, you'd get it. And right now, I can recommend a few. So if somebody says, I can recommend it would take people about 30 days, you read these books, you're home free, right? You're ready to roll. They are, right? So if whoever is listening, get your pen out. Or if you're on your keyboard, start typing.
Sweet.
First of all, UFOs of the National Security State, Volumes 1 and 2 by Richard Dolan. Okay? So if you go to my website, you can find links to all these books. Paradigm Research Group main site, you can find links to all these books. Whatever, you can easily get them on Google. So anyway, UFOs in the National Security State, Volumes 1 and 2 by Richard Dolan. AD After Disclosure just came out by Richard Dolan and Bryce Zabel. Okay, AD After Disclosure. UFOs. Generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record by Leslie Kane. All right. And then there's another book out, and this is for those like myself whose attention spans are now down to about 4.5 seconds and really don't have time to actually read words, but we like the pictures. You know what I mean? The YouTubers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There is a book out on contact right now, which probably is the best effort yet to sort of bring the concept of contact, which is pretty heavy stuff, to just anybody in a way that's not threatening, it's not overwhelming, and but gets you into it. It gives you a sense of what's going on, and it's called The Art of Close Encounters. It's the second book from Kim Carlsberg, and it's available now at theartofcloseencounters.com. And it's 350 pages of art. Nice. Well, actually, about half of those pages are art. It's about 175 pages of art, of renderings by contactees and researchers and so forth. describing the full range of the phenomena of contact, and that's pretty cool, pretty substantial. And then knock off a couple of documentaries. I recommend highly Out of the Blue, both the original and revised versions by Tim Coleman and James Fox. Probably the best documentary ever made on the UFO subject, though it's getting competition. I recommend also James Fox's recent I Know What I Saw. Very strongly recommend Terry Toffness's The Day Before Disclosure, which is out and also available free on the net. You can also buy it. There's a good crop circle movie out recent by Suzanne Taylor called What on Earth? The mystery, Inside the Crop Circle Mystery, which is fairly recent, and there are a number of others. Just those books and a few docs, and you've got it.
Yeah.
Right? Any reasonable person will have figured out, okay, ETs are here. The government knows about it. The government's embargoed it. And there you have it. And then they can decide what they want to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just for myself. I couldn't agree with you more about the more overzealous one gets, the more resistance you meet. And I just definitely like getting the opinions of others just who have all the documentation that's been done by all these different ufologists that, like you say, any reasonable human being can look at this and at the very least say, yes, this warrants those serious studies like you were talking about. In the very least. If they're truly
that was
scientific.
True 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we're living in a very surreal situation here. Right? By the way, I left out a key book, UFOs and Nukes by Robert Hastings. Also quite new, very powerful. In fact, he just presented at Oxford University. A little small presentation there, but still noteworthy. UFOs and Nukes, Robert Hastings. That's enough. That's all you need. Really.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 5,000 more if you got the time.
Yeah, no
but
kidding.
That's enough. And these books are all written in the last couple of years. So again, and I think part of the reason that people are still very reluctant is that they know that when this lie is finally revealed and acknowledged, that it's going to kind of open up a massive whoop-ass can of worms. And they sort of know that things are going to get real sticky and nasty and unpleasant for a while, and a lot of the illusions that they know they've been carrying around about American supremacy and exceptionalism and the government and what it does or doesn't do. These things are all going to suddenly be confronted, and some people just aren't ready to do it. They just don't want to go through it. It's like somebody that needs an operation badly, but frankly, they're just not ready to go through it, and so they put it off and they put it off. I understand that. It's acceptable. Look, this is a tough situation we're in, and we're not going to get out of it easily. And I'm not surprised that people are not rushing forward to engage it. But be assured that they will have to engage it. It's like it ain't going away. The ETs are not going anywhere. At least that's the way it seems. And we will deal with this. And we will deal with all of the rest of the societal dysfunctions, particularly in governance, that have grown up in the age of secrecy and the rise of the national security states around the world. We will deal with it all, one way or another. And the outcome will either be good or bad or tragic. But, the role of the advocate is to stand up and say, okay, look, I'm ready to deal with it. Who's with me? That's part of the role of the advocate. And some people will say, okay, I'm with you, and others say no. But if nobody stands up and says, let's go, then nobody's going anywhere. So that's part of the role of the advocate, is to do that. But I think that it's also important that an advocate try to have some understanding that just because you're ready to stand up and go for it doesn't mean everybody else is.
Yeah.
And you have to accept that. Otherwise, you risk becoming shrill and overbearing, and that's not gonna help. So, I am confident though that soon we're going to see some breakthroughs, particularly in funding. I think we're going to see some Hollywood people, maybe some sports stars, maybe some of the high-tech people. They're going to say, "Oh my God, this is the biggest issue of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be part of this. I want to help resolve this." Because I can assure you that 1,000 years from now, nobody's going to remember who saved some whales in the Antarctic or a few porpoise, who reformed the salmon farming in the St. Lawrence River, or not that these aren't worthy things, or even who helped stop the latest genocide in Rwanda, Zimbabwe, or whatever. But those who end up bringing about the end of this truth embargo
mm-hmm.
will be the focus of attention by historians and political scientists and the public in general for 1,000 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm right there with you in terms of understanding the levity of and just the implications. I think just the things I ran into on my own, being an advocate of sorts myself, is that people just don't see the link. They don't see how does this pertain to my day? It's you have to tell them, dude, okay, everything that's going on in society now is integrated with this illusion that's put up so that certain factions understand this only to themselves. So, that's how.
Well, it's called rule by secrecy. I mean, a great name. I have not, and forgive me, Jim. I haven't read the book, but Jim Mars came up with a great book title called Rule by Secrecy. And it's true in the sense that secrecy, since 1945, more than ever in history, has become a fundamental systemic tool of governance. Mm-hmm. In other words, the less you know, the better, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's toxic and will eventually destroy everything it touches. But nevertheless, it's quite prevalent. Okay, so that we have that problem. But the connections and the implications, we could spend days discussing. Let me just give you a couple of examples. An article yesterday. There's a developing strain of drug-resistant malaria. If this were to continue and spread, it could kill hundreds of millions of people. Mm-hmm. And of course, we have a whole bunch of other diseases. Now, one of the reasons that we're still struggling with diseases is because of hygiene worldwide. Now, this wasn't the case, say, a couple hundred years ago. But now, when you have breakouts of disease anywhere in the world, somebody's getting on an airplane and flying to Bonn or New York or Peking, all right? Mm-hmm. Beijing, rather. And so now we're all vulnerable to the spread of diseases. And one of the reasons the disease continues to spread is hygiene. A huge portion of the world is still walking around its own feces and doesn't have enough water. And this is the key. The key to hygiene is water, and we don't have enough of it. And people say, "Oh, that can't be true. I got plenty." Laugh. Mm-hmm. Read the reports. Just go and Google water crisis and just read the reports from one agency after another. The greatest threat to civil discord in the 21st century, aside from nuclear war, which we could still have, is water. There's not enough of it. Now, we have oceans full of it, but you can't use it because it's salt, heavily salted. So, if we could generate enough fresh water, that fresh water would be the major solution to bringing about proper hygiene, that plus medicines, to the parts of the world that are going to continue to generate emerging diseases, which will increasingly, as we apply medicines to them, become drug-resistant. Now, why don't we have enough fresh water? Actually, it's really simple. Because the cost of converting salt water to fresh water is financially not viable. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is that it is virtually 100% energy dependent. And thanks to some other wonderful policies, we have driven the price of energy to the moon. Mm-hmm. I think I just read yesterday or the day before that the price of gasoline in Europe will soon hit $9 a gallon.
Wow.
oil is approaching $100 a barrel. Well, look, here's the deal. The most effective way to create water is through desalinization using steam. Steam desalinization, we have plants around the world, but they cost a fortune, and they can only generate limited amounts in special circumstances, but it produces some of the purest water that you can have. Mm-hmm. And guess what? If you could get an energy source that cost a fraction, that generated heat at a fraction of the cost that fossil fuel energy systems or nuclear energy systems created, you would then be able to convert all the seawater you wanted into fresh water anywhere in the world. Now, you starting to follow my logic here?
Absolutely.
So if it turns out that the energy systems that drive the extraterrestrial vehicles, at least the in our atmosphere vehicles, I don't know about interstellar motherships, but the craft that we have gotten in our possession since 1940s, maybe in the 1930s, if it turns out that the energy systems in those craft, if properly developed, could generate electrons and heat at 1 cent or 1/10 of a cent on the dollar, there will never be anything like free energy. There's no such thing. But extremely low, even 5 cents on the dollar, meaning they can generate heat at a fraction of the cost. Then had we developed or brought that out into the public domain 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, we would already have in place vast desalinization plants cranking out billions of gallons of fresh water everywhere in the world that we need it. And the hygiene problem would be solved. Food problem, by the way, would also be solved. Better food, better hygiene, less disease. How many people have died because that solution was not available? I'm going to guess somewhere between 50 and 450 million people. So do you want to be the press spokesperson that steps out in front of the people, either over at the Department of Defense or maybe at the World Health Organization or maybe even the White House Press Corps, and explain to them why that technology had to be suppressed for the extra 20, 30, 40 years, and then how much you do regret those 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 200, 300, 400 million people that died, because we just weren't ready to handle the truth. I don't think you want to be in that position, but somebody is.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
That's how big it is. That's how big the implications are. And that's just one of them.
Yeah.
It goes on and on and on. Now, it may prove to be the case that the energy systems that drive those craft, for technological reasons, are not available to us, though I have serious doubts of that. But nevertheless, and that, fine, they know that they're there, but they can't duplicate them, they can't make them work, whatever, right? It's possible. Right? But I seriously doubt it.
Yeah.
And, of course, the government at any time can come forward and say, hey, look, here's the deal. We know you're concerned about this, but we have studied the energy systems of these vehicles, and these systems can't be adapted to human use. But, of course, the government's not going to do that because there are no ETs. There are no craft. There's a truth embargo. So we have to trust them. And, of course, nobody trusts them anymore. However, it just so happens that while the energy issue may be in doubt, we absolutely know for a fact that they have created their own anti-gravitic propulsion vehicles. We have our own saucers. We can fly without aerodynamics. Well, when you get into anti-gravitic propulsion, a whole bunch of stuff falls out of that without even getting into very low-cost alternative energy. And one of the best examples that I can give in terms of fresh water is that anti-gravitic propulsion would probably allow us to tow icebergs from the Antarctic anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Fresh
water floats on salt water. And so essentially, you got a place in the world that needs billions of gallons of fresh water. You just tow an iceberg off the coast, put in the piping, pipe it straight in as it melts down. We could probably do that with anti-gravitic. We can't do it with current technology. We could do it with anti-gravitic propulsion. And so we could probably solve the water even without an energy solution. Just totally. And by the way, those icebergs are going to melt anyway, right? And by the way, when icebergs melt indirectly into the oceans, they essentially decrease the salinity. And the decrease in salinity by fresh water actually has the ability to disrupt ocean currents. And if we were to sufficiently disrupt ocean currents enough, we could wipe out a good deal of Western civilization, which is to say, and this has been brought up a number of times in various movies, if the Gulf current, if the fundamental Atlantic current were to be disrupted by massive ice melts, it would turn in basically United Kingdom into a glacier. And so, towing icebergs and then sucking all the water out and taking it inland, it would actually be a good thing. So I mean, this may sound like science fiction. It isn't. We've had anti-gravitic craft for decades. So again, I mean, the job of the advocate is to point out the obvious, even when the obvious is overwhelmingly profound. And so I'm not going to apologize for how profound these statements are.
Oh, please don't.
Because they're true.
Absolutely.
Right? When Copernicus tried to point out, with Galileo's help, that guess what? The Earth goes around the sun. That was incredibly profound. Well, that wasn't that. What could they say? What are they going to do? Oh, we're not going to tell you, or because it's profound. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And so this ET issue is profound. It is what it is, and it's true. And so people can say, well, it's just too profound, I can't deal with it. It should be the opposite. Because it's so profound, we must deal with it.
Absolutely. And that's very true. I mean, because a lot of people don't think about that, the application of that technology. And as you're saying, the anti-gravitic technology, even without the use of the reversed extraterrestrial tech, once again just kind of exemplifies that truth embargo, how it's just a fundamental truth of that they're trying to hold back in order to maintain this control, apparently.
Well, the truth embargo, I mean, it's truth embargo uber all.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning until we end the truth embargo, everything else must serve its sustenance. Another simpler way this is very simple, very basic, but yet very emotional. I mean, trivial in its impact in a sense, but extremely useful in making the point. Do you want to be the NASA spokesperson that steps out in front of a camera a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and has to explain to the American people and the family of our astronauts why they had to continue to be sent into space on very complex chemical rockets that then had to, that then essentially land. They were gliding hot plates, is what they were, because they ran out of gas. And 14 astronauts died in space, when in fact we had the ability to completely eliminate the shuttle program and put people into space as part of a public space program and anti-gravitic technology decades before. Do you want to be that NASA spokesperson?
Honestly, I would be that NASA spokesperson right now if it got the job done. So,
well, I mean, that would be the way to approach it. But I mean, you would want to be apologizing profusely.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, that in terms of, I guess you could say, this relationship between suppressed technology and the real world consequences. It doesn't get any clearer than that. Yeah, we could have sent them up there in an anti-gravitic craft, but if we had done that, you would have known about the ETs, and that would have ended the truth embargo. And so, we had to break some eggs,
That's so.
The truth embargo was one big, omelet, and in order to maintain it, we got to break some eggs. Well, how many press conferences are we going to have like that? How many people are going to have to walk out in front of the cameras with these kinds of massive mea culpas? And after it's all said and done, is anybody ever going to believe the government about anything ever again? Well, they will, because the state moves on. But still, the damage just accumulates and accumulates. And at some point, enough is enough. I mean, but even the Inquisition came to an end. All right, I mean, at some point, I forget who. One of the popes, I think, bandaged it or something. But at some point, it was creating so much bad press, for the Catholic Church, all these racks, all this torture, thumb screws, whatever. They decided it just wasn't in their best interest to keep it up. And so even that came to an end. And so the truth embargo would come to an end. Yeah. However, let's just say that the public is going to be in a much more powerful position to respond to this process than, say, the serfs of Europe in that time. There's going to be prices to be paid. There's going to be consequences to these institutions. And so the invitation is to the institutions themselves, to the people inside of NASA, to the people inside of the Air Force and the Naval Intelligence and the CIA and the NSA, the people that work in national security at the deepest realms, the people even inside the corporations with their massive security programs and black budget operations. At some point, you need to end this. At some point, you need to say, okay, it's time to move on, and that to continue it is going to do grave damage to everybody. You, your company, your organization, your agency, your president, your party, your country. At some point, you've got to end it, like the Inquisition. At some point, you put away the thumb screws, you put away the racks, you put away the dogma, the ideology, the burning stakes. You simply put it away and move forward to a better life, a better world, a more civilized, higher consciousness society. And so one of the roles of the advocates is to speak to them too and say, look, think about changing. Think about joining us. You're citizens like we are. Everybody's citizen here. Where you work, you're all citizens of the U.S., you're all citizens of the United Kingdom or Australia or Canada. Think about doing what you can to end this truth embargo. Enough is enough.
Exactly. And one of the things we commonly do here on Universal Truth Evolution is we take a break at the top of the hour, so allow you to get a drink or whatever, and as well as everyone in our audience here, and then we can come back and there's definitely some more questions I'd love to get your take on when we get back.
I think I've talked enough. Let's take some questions. Absolutely.
Well, it's always a fascinating time hearing what you have to share, for sure. So definitely appreciate it. Yeah. So. All right, we're going to go ahead and take about a 5-minute break here. So go ahead and grab a drink and get comfy, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
She's
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. As long as you can reconnect, we can take some questions, right?
Yeah, I'm actually back now. So that was just kind of juggled the phone there. So yeah, we can now start taking questions. And actually, I did have one too. Just I wanted to get your take on some of the I don't know what you could say. I guess you can call them rumors out there. I was just wondering what your take on the concept of stuff like Project Bluebeam is, and how likely a false flag using like extraterrestrials to stage an event is in terms of this embargo being continued, in one way, shape, or form, but just trying to control the disclosure that way instead of actually, doing it the rational way.
I'm asked the question I got. As I indicated before, there are just a plethora of theories out there about every aspect of this. In other words, we're long on theory, short on hard information. Now, I'm not blaming anybody. The government has created that situation. The government has done everything it can to suppress the quality of information that the public has on this subject and the amount that it has. And so in the absence of information, you are moving into the theoretical. So there are just all these speculations about what has happened, what is happening, what's going to happen. And that makes it that much more difficult to operate, but it is simply the nature of this reality. So Project Bluebeam is just one more, to me, speculation about what might happen. And I think I have two points that I'd like to usually make about that. One, I'm not surprised at all that people are suspicious of government's intentions regarding disclosure. There is plenty of reasons to be worried that an event like this could be misused. And so I'm glad that people are suspicious. I'm glad that they're raising this concern and speculation, and we should. However, my second point is I doubt it's going to happen. There are a number of reasons why playing that particular game this time around would be an extremely unwise decision on the part of government. It's not that they haven't done it before. I mean, false flag events and that kind of stuff go back forever. I mean, governments have been using it. It's one of the most effective and easiest games a government can play. And so they're tempted, but this is the age of the Internet. It's the age of the global noosphere. Billions of people able to focus on a particular issue at will, if they wish to. And so the thing government needs to understand is that the disclosure event will be scrutinized by more people to a greater degree than anything that has ever happened before in history, and that any attempt to screw around with this is probably just going to blow up in their face with very unpleasant consequences. And so if ever there was a time for government to play it straight, this is it. And I think that's what will happen. And that doesn't mean that in the details there won't be some finesse. There won't be the odd misrepresentation. There's certainly going to be some withheld information. So it's not going to be clean, but a significant attempt to manipulate this would be a catastrophic mistake on the part of government. And I don't think it will happen. But I'll say this. We'll be watching real closely, and I can assure you that whatever does happen is going to be examined in great detail, and what will be will be. So that's my thinking about it.
Cool.
But my sense is I bet against anything along the lines of booming actually happening.
Yeah, that's cool. I think the more opinions we get on these things, and I'm with you too. I think the more we examine the possibilities, just to be aware of them, whether they come to fruition that way or not, is it's good to examine these different possibilities. And And yeah.
Well, there's an example. There has been a historic speculation that we deliberately blew up the Maine down in Cuba in order to justify launching the Spanish-American War.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if that's true or not. There's a lot of reasons battleships can blow up. They're dangerous places. But think about it. If they did blow up the Maine, right, who in the United States is going to challenge that?
Mm-hmm.
Who, probably most of the United States even know where Cuba was. And there was some articles appear in a newspaper. That's it. I mean, the ability of the public to somehow get to the bottom of what happened with the Maine, out of the question. And so, if in fact that was a false flag, it's a no-brainer. It's easy to do. It's virtually foolproof. This isn't then. This is not then. This is 2010, 2011, and I can assure you, they try to pull a stunt along the lines of, let's blow something up and blame it on the ETs. It will be the biggest mistake they've ever made, and will bring down whole governments, and a whole lot of people are going to probably end up either in prison or worse. So I hope they'll be wise and realize that this is not the time for that kind of nonsense.
Yeah, I agree with you with your assessment of that being a very unwise path to go towards, for sure. We're getting a lot of questions about if you know anything concerning the reports of a Stargate situation in the Gulf of Aden near Yemen. I'm not sure if you've heard any more corroboration on that or anything like that.
One of countless theories and speculations out there and stories. I hate to, it's like somebody saying to you, what's your opinion of the top 10 movies, well, I thought that Avatar was really good. I mean, there's people out there who hated Avatar, they just, what I said earlier about the truth embargo creates this truth vacuum, and we're forced to sort of swim in a sea of speculations. Also, the whole disinformation process is so finely honed, and people have seen it played out by the government for so long, and naturally citizens have said, that's kind of cool, and so I can do that too. And so you've got citizens doing disinformation campaign. And so you got anybody can, and the flip side of the internet is that anybody can cook up a pretty damn good story and give it life, and this happens now frequently. And I accept that. It's all right. Some 15-year-old can launch something in Hoboken, and within 2 months, it's gone around the world 5 times, and it's being reported in the in the London Times. I don't have much confidence in that stuff going on. It's been pumped up on some very well-known disinformation sites. So Stargates in general, don't have a lot of confidence in that. It's and by the way, one of the interesting dynamics of this last 60 years is that in addition to the rise of the internet, you had the emergence of computer-generated imagery, CGI, and thus essentially you had the golden age of science fiction. I mean, science fiction is as good as it gets, and it's going to get better. And so, at the same time the truth embargo was advancing forward, you had a steady development of the ability of Hollywood and other entertainment realms to generate science fiction. And science fiction, to me, is the great modern art form. And so some of the best ideas and some of the best science fiction books have been put into movies, and of course, all manner of cool stuff has been put up on the screen. And not surprisingly, this is all happening while the truth embargo is in place. And so people are going to these. One of the reasons that Avatar did $2.7 billion one of the reasons that the ET subject is one of the most successful subjects in all of entertainment history is because in the absence of the fundamental truth of this, people are saying, well, look, the government won't tell me the truth, but I can connect to the issue if I go to these movies. And because they sort of know it's true, though they don't know the details, these movies become even more enticing. And so people go to these movies in droves. So this is their connection to the subject matter through the lens, the prism of Hollywood screenplays. Mm-hmm. So ideas turn up in these movies all the time: stargates, time travel, teleportation, galactic federation, and on and on and on. And what people do is they grab this stuff from the movies, and the next thing you know, it's turning up in the information stream as part of the, quote, speculative flow. And so we have this very interesting dynamic going on between the development of theoretical structures in the exopolitical world and the stuff being put out by Hollywood and screenplays. And so if people are starting to invest their time in the ideas of stargates in the Gulf of Aden or in Iraq or anywhere else, I would suggest that a very significant reason for that is the place of stargates in movies and books. Actually, the idea of Stargate goes back in science fiction books into the 50s. Now, I'm not criticizing here. No, I'm just saying that this is the dynamic going on. Right? It's not an accident that all of the internet material out there about the so-called Galactic Federation, right? That's the same thing they called it in Star Trek, Galactic Federation. And so, again, until the truth embargo was over, and we're able to finally write the real Encyclopedia Galactica and get all this stuff down as it really happened, we're living in this mix of fiction, disinfo, misinfo, fact, theory, speculation. It's a very murky soup. Which, if you're only interested in the entertainment value, it's okay, right? I mean, if all you're interested in is being entertained, reading about stargates in the Gulf of Aden or reading Sorcha Fowl and some of these other disinfo operations, it's fun. It's games. I'm not going to condemn anybody for that. But if your interest is solving real problems in the real world and advancing civilization, well, entertainment doesn't quite go there. That's entertainment. That's not its job. You got to get down to the real stuff. And so it's important to acknowledge once in a while that a significant portion of everything on the Internet connected to extraterrestrials is simply fantasy. Maybe fantasy's too strong. It's theoretically wrong. All right? Which is not, again, some people rant about that and rave about how awful that is and how awful the people in it because they're wrong a lot. I don't see it that way at all. People are dealing with this as they want to deal with it and within the context that they're facing. And so the fact that there's this vast mix of theory and speculation and Hollywood stuff is not surprising to me at all. And so again, I view it as it is, as a reality of the circumstances, which by and large were pretty much established by the state, not by us. Right? I mean, they didn't take a vote on this. They didn't go to the American people and say, who wants a truth embargo? So they started this. They need to end it with our assistance and pressure. And we do need eventually to write the Encyclopedia Galactica. We need to know the truth of this world. We need to be able to know, okay, what's a screenplay and what's history? What's a fun construct of some screenwriter in Hollywood and what really did happen in 1947, 65, 67, 98. One of the things we need to start really paying more attention to as we teach the next generation of kids is how important it is to be able to discern reality from surreality, fiction from fact, entertainment from substance, or entertainment from reality in our lives. Because the movies and the TVs and the computer, this stuff is all 10, 20, 30, 50, 60 years old. We just got all this stuff. And so it didn't come with user manuals. And so society is still figuring out what to do with all this, and it's messy. And so one of the effects of all this introduction of movies and television and internet and YouTube and everything else is that the ability for children to learn to discern fact from fiction is deteriorating. And if that is allowed to continue, and we end up with a culture, a broad-based culture, in which people can't really tell the difference, it's not going to go well. It's not going to be a place you're going to want to live. You're going to want to move to another planet. One of my favorite lines in all of movies now, which I only picked up on because I finally saw the movie on cable. I never go to movies in the theater. I get them on cable later, and it's usually somebody else's cable because I don't have it. I saw the movie Watchmen, and one of the characters, very cool character in the movie Watchmen, is Captain Manhattan, and at the very end of the movie, he makes this wonderful line. He says, "I need to move to a less complicated galaxy," or I need to go to a galaxy that's less complicated. In which case, he departs. Mm-hmm. Well, if we don't get our act together here, and if we don't start teaching our kids how to determine the difference between fact and fiction, you will want to move to a less complicated galaxy at that point, because I can tell you, it's going to get really rough here.
Mm-hmm. We do have another question concerning any thoughts or insights you have on apparently the flight dynamics of electrogravitically driven aircrafts and ships.
Well, there's a number of websites that address this. There's been some excellent theoretical speculation on the nature of these craft, Canlis, Rat, Stonehill, Bob Lazar even, and our own physics, not surprisingly, spurred on by the very existence of these craft in our space. Mm-hmm. In the public domain, outside of the covert world, there's still some pretty good advancement, and we're starting to get close to understanding, I think, how these things work. But no one, I think, can truly say for sure how they work. Only the government's top scientists working in the ET, classified underground world, which is where most of this is underground now, can say. I think one thing that's worth noting is that I think it's very likely, and this is cool, it's a speculation, but it's a notable and important speculation. I think it's very likely that the propulsion physics of the saucers that operate, mostly saucers, right? Saucer-like craft, though there are some that are not saucers that may be built differently, but they're all angravitic. That the technology, the propulsion technology of those craft may not be the same as the technology of the motherships that these things come from, assuming they're not based in bases here. But even if they're based in bases here, they got here by motherships. The motherships, I think it's not an unreasonable speculation to assume that the motherships are interstellar, and the saucers are not. But it may prove otherwise. But I mean, it's a pretty good speculation. Now, these motherships, which are occasionally seen, are huge. And if there's any movement back and forth between star systems, it's in these ships. So that's the first point to make, right? Some people are on the misperception that these 30-foot saucers are traveling back and forth between solar systems. I really doubt that. So we're dealing with a propulsion that's designed to operate in the atmosphere of planets, and there's been a lot of discussions about why the saucer shape seems to be relatively ideal for this. But in any event, it somehow involves the manipulation of gravity, and by extension, the manipulation of space, and possibly the manipulation of time. And that's about as far as you can go. I mean, there's been some wonderful little teaching tools that you occasionally see used. I mean, you imagine a tablecloth made of rubber, a rubber tablecloth, and you're trying to get from one side of the tablecloth to the other. And one way is to simply travel the distance from one to the other, or the other is to pinch it, to pull the spot on the other end of the tablecloth to you, to grab it and pull it to you, and then to jump to that space. So you're not actually traveling distance between the two spots, right? But altering the distance and then moving to the other. Little thing, is that exactly how? I don't know. But I can tell you that we're starting to develop a theoretical. I mean, Jack Sarfati, of course, is famous on the Internet for being the rogue physicist, renegade physicist, whatever. He's certainly an independent physicist, been funded by various people, who's trying to understand star drive. I'm sure Jack thinks he does understand it. And you can go to stardrive.org, I think, or just Google Jack Sarfati, and you can see his theories about it. But believe me, one of the ironies of this is that if the truth embargo were to remain in place indefinitely, we're probably going to figure out star drive inside 100 years, just on our own physics, right? So that's how rapidly we're ascending. I think one of the things that points I like to make when it comes to my mind, which it just has, is that there's a certain a body of theory out there about how human beings are basically not much further along than orangutans, and that we're very primitive, and these beings are super advanced, godlike, and we're nematodes here, and so forth, and they're trying to then view it from that point of view, and I don't see that at all. We are not that at all. Humans are a highly advanced species, and we are on an extremely accelerated technological learning curve that very few people can understand. In other words, a lot of people that have that think this way don't have the knowledge base to understand that the technological learning curve we're on and how fast we're moving. And so while there's ample amount of primitive human behavior going on in any given day, I understand that. Collectively as a species, our command of the physical world is exponentially growing, and we probably figure out star travel on our own in 100 years, which is why I believe the ETs are here. I mean, it's one of the reasons they're here, is that we're headed for the stars already. We don't necessarily even need any crash vehicles of theirs. The fact that we have them is interesting, and we'll see how that plays out. But we're headed for the stars, and I think very likely, and in this regard, I agree with certain advanced thinking futurists that write about this, that the fact that we're headed for the stars is of some interest to them, and that they are engaging us because when that happens, when a sentient species reaches the point that we are, the idea that, now we're just going to head out to the stars and we're going to take our diseases and our nuclear bombs and our ray guns and go play cowboys and Indians in the galaxy, I don't think that's allowed. I think no, that doesn't happen. And so a process has to go on where we're sort of indoctrinated. We're made aware of the larger community, and I guess eventually we learn the rules. And that this process is not unusual, that it's happened before. This is a model that I'm comfortable with, and generally I see it as the best model that explains what's going on. So I bring it up only because People agree or disagree with that model, but those that try to make this case that we're this ultra primitive, species that the ETs view as like pets or something is incorrect. It doesn't reflect reality. We're highly sophisticated. Our technological skills are growing very rapidly with or without ETs, and so we need to understand that. We're not equals to them, I suspect, but we're not their lapdogs either. So I'm not. I would not be surprised at all if post-disclosure we find that our overall position in the political realities that extend outside our solar system is not as bad as we might have thought. That we might have a legitimate place, even a respectful place to some degree, assuming that we're willing to sort of make some adjustments. Again, we're not taking our nonsense into space. I mean, there are a lot of people that believe that overpopulation is a good thing, that the more people we have, the more pressure we have to leave the planet, and after we get to 100 billion, it'll be so miserable here that billions of us will flee into space to take up residence. And I find that pretty funny. I mean, it's really hysterical in a way. They're just delusional to think this. We live in a larger reality, in a larger political context, and there are rules out there, and we're about to learn those rules pretty soon. And I think that some people will find them perfectly reasonable, and other people will be appalled. But there's not a damn thing we can do about them, because these rules are being put in place by structures and civilizations far more advanced than we are, and we can only hope that they will be generous in their patience as we adapt to the new world that's coming, assuming we can get there. We still could blow ourselves up. Understand? I mean, there's still the potential for very catastrophic events here on our planet. And one of the great exopolitical questions that hangs out there is would a exterior political reality intervene? In other words, if we launch ourselves into another unbelievably destructive period, would they step in and go, no, you can't do that? Some people think, oh yeah, they would. Oh, they'd stop our launched missiles in the air and whatever. I'm not so sure about that. I think that they have a very long. The universe is old. The galaxy is very old. I think that these entities are capable of thinking very long term, and I think that if we decided to blow ourselves up, they might think, okay, well, look, we'll get back to you in a couple of thousand years and see how you're doing. Maybe you'll be ready then. I really encourage people to think that way. All right? If they think that the ETs are the savior or gods, I don't see that. I don't think that supports that.
I agree with you, too. I don't think that there's any kind of, it's not necessarily a savior. There's one point that I like to make, too, that even if you're not like a savior or even necessarily have malevolent intentions as some kind of spacefaring extraterrestrial race, there's a lot of resources on this planet that I'm sure are exploited. So it's like, I think it really comes down to a strategical, do we want to deal with the radiation there and then all the other crap that comes along with cleaning that up? Should these things do this? I think that also weighs into into that rationale too.
Maybe. Because but again, they could just say, we'll be back in 2,000 years. Well, we could. And but then if you guys have got your act together, we'll talk to you then.
Yeah, because we have the incidents too from the different government officials who said that they did shut down the missiles. So I'm sure they did that for more than just like, look how bad we are. You know what I mean? I'm sure there had something had more.
Yeah, they did, but they didn't destroy them. They could probably destroy every nuclear missile in every silo in the world. That would send a strong message. They haven't did. Jesus Christ came in 2,000 years ago with some very strong messages about how we should probably live if we would like to have a far more high consciousness, advanced, and enjoyable society. And then he disappeared for the next 2,000 years. So, I don't know what the ET's intentions are. Mm-hmm. And it would be a big mistake to think we know what their intentions are. Yeah, but I don't think they are gods. I do not think they are saviors. And if we decide to launch a nuclear attack, or if we decide to pollute every single ounce of water in this planet, if we decide to kill ourselves off with uncontrollable diseases, I think that they are more than capable of standing off and going, Okay. What can we
Yeah.
say? You're not ready yet. We'll be back. We'll see you in a while. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.
So, people got to wake up here. This is serious business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, if you care, some people don't care. Some people don't have children; they have grandchildren, and frankly, they'd probably like to off themselves tomorrow. But there are plenty of people out there that actually have children and grandchildren, and would like to see them have good lives. They'd like to see the species advance. And these people have got to start thinking about this stuff. They need to start getting in the game here, but understand that the government is still somewhat devoted to preventing that, to preventing good people from knowing what they need to know to make informed decisions about this. And this is, of course, the dilemma that we face. And it's, again, the dilemma that exopolitics, or at least the disclosure movement, is determined to resolve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we actually do have a caller, so we can see if this caller. Let's see what question here. Hello, caller. You are on the air. Universal Truth Evolution with Stephen Bassett. So, how's it going?
Hey, how are you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Just fine.
Cool. So, my question was this: I just tuned in. I noticed you weren't referring to these beings as gods. It's understandable, but what about the notion that humanity as we know it on this planet perhaps is the result of them bringing us here, is the result of them genetically altering some kind of hominid animal on this planet? In a sense, that would make them our creators. So to a degree, that would you would also have to take into account that might also make them interested in our conscious evolution. How would you address that?
Yeah, this is really great stuff. This is some of the best stuff out there in terms of the theoretical constructs that people are trying to put together. There has been a very excellent series that's been running now on History Channel called Ancient Aliens. Boy, they just got some money behind them and were able to do it right. And Giorgio Tsoukalos, I think, is one of the key people involved. And Bob, nothing has brought up these kinds of issues better than this series ever. It's very strong stuff. I will say my working model, my personal working model, it goes like this. I believe that virtually all of the paranormal lore that is out there worldwide, leprechauns, angels, trolls, old hags, gnomes, you name it, demons, the whole 9 yards, all of it, boogeyman, right, is ET contact going back forever, being interpreted as best it could be interpreted by the culture of the time. So then in terms of gods, yes, gods, the gods of these various cultures, ETs, all the way. Secondly, I'm not going to be surprised at all if they've been genetically dealing with us. The contact evidence, which is massive, tens and tens of thousands of reports written up in many cases, often, anonymous people just simply trying to tell their stories, seem to clearly indicate that they have enormous skills with genetics, with life, and that this is what they do. I think it's very likely that genetic material has been moving around the galaxy forever, going back hugely in time, where various species are moving genetic material around. And so that there is a genetic connection between biospheres that will probably be staggering to us when we learn it. 3, that because of this ability to deal with genetics, and probably because that they, like us, put a powerful premium on the concept of self-aware sentient life. Not that the cockroach is not noble in its own right, but the self-aware animal, which is what we are, is a significant paradigm change. and they are too, and this is a big deal, and I think that they create it, they help advance it, and so it's very likely that to some degree we owe aspects of who we are to interventions by non-human intelligences going back in time who have the power of genetic science, which one day we will have, by the way. We're rapidly there, so there's nothing shocking about that. Now, does that make us our creators? Not, well, sort of.
It makes them kind of our mentors in a way.
Well, it certainly makes them involved with us. Life itself obviously goes back a very long time, and we do not know where that comes from ultimately, though I do understand some of the theories of its natural involvement. But, who created the universe itself? What happened before the Big Bang? There are deeper questions that extend beyond even ETs, and I don't think the ETs have the answers to those. I'd be very shocked if they did. And so religion is not fundamentally threatened by the presence of extraterrestrials, and I think the religion will thrive in the post-disclosure world. Mm-hmm. But we are going to very much have to reassess our entire cultural lore. But frankly, I think most people are going to find it fascinating. I mean, God knows it's going to keep the History Channel and the Discovery Channel with content filled up for decades. All of our cultural history will have to be re-examined. Now, if the ETs, and I certainly hope this is the case, have kept a very nice record of all this, in other words, if they've got some really cool CDs, the kind that have 4 billion terabytes on each disc, that essentially have recorded what they know about our history going back forever, and that becomes available to us, that will be ultra cool. But don't know. But in any event, one way or the other, we're going to have to completely reassess our cultural lore. And all that means is...
You brought up an interesting point. Can I address it real fast?
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm.
So you brought up the point that they may have records of our existence and our being. So that's kind of interesting that you would jump to that assumption, but you wouldn't jump to the assumption that they might possibly at the same time might want to defend us from an absolute catastrophic, complete destruction of the entire planet.
Again, I'm not saying that they wouldn't intervene. I'm saying that it's a mistake to assume that they would, because I know I've got people out there that I deal with who are readily convinced that they will intervene. It's just a foregone conclusion, and I don't see that at all. Over the history of this planet, we have had many, many mass extinction events. And there's one event called the Lesser Dryas where, the numbers could be off, but there have been speculations that the human population dropped down in the 10,000 range or less. So this idea that, but of course we weren't advanced civilization at that point, right? I mean, one could make the case that we've now achieved a place where we just can't go away. It's just not, not allowed to happen. So, again, we're in a highly speculative area. So I don't want to rule out the possibility that they have long-term interest in us and they're not going to allow us to do something really stupid. But remember, the Earth isn't going anywhere, and they do think long-term. And so, again, all it means is that they may then have to come back and revisit us in a couple of thousand years if we screw up, or 500 years or 1,000 years. So I'm just trying to paint the possibilities here. So in terms of the record concept, I mean, we're really talking about a slightly different subject. The fact that they might be keeping a record is notable, but that doesn't imply that they would intervene, right? It simply implies that they've kept a record. Now, I hope they have, because it would just be the coolest thing going, but in any event, what is important here is that we ultimately must face reality. In other words, I think every culture eventually reaches the point where they have to go back and clean up their history. And what I may clean it up, and actually that's the wrong phrase. They have to sort it out. All right, okay, here's what happened. Here's what really was going on. Now, that wouldn't be possible if we didn't have multiple civilizations out there, right? Because our history would be gone to us. When they burned the Alexandria Library, we lost a huge chunk of it right there, right? So, but ETs provide the possibility that our history may not be lost to us, and then we could see it. But we probably, even on our own, will be able to figure it out. That one of the great enterprises of the post-disclosure world is thousands and thousands of scholars are all going to become Zachariah Sitchins, and they're going to say the ET hypothesis is now proven. We are going to go back and we're going to examine everything we have about the history of human civilization, and we're going to assess the ET connections, and we're going to assess our cultural histories and lores and everything else. And I think when they do that, they're going to come up with some rather profound and interesting reassessments, which ultimately I will find cool. Others may not. But if you look at our cultural lores, they're really messy and crazy and wild and don't make sense. But once you factor in the ET hypothesis, they start making sense. And I like the idea of a cultural history that makes sense as opposed to something that's kind of a fairy tale.
To be honest, that sounds a bit unlikely to me. That it would come, the knowledge would have to come from scholars, trickling down. I think it's more so going to be from the inside out. I think if anything, these ET are going to want us individually to acknowledge their existence. And the reason I say this, I point to the fact that the cabal, the power structure that has so much grit in the education system, in the banking system, will do everything it can to maintain its power. And if people know of these things, then it's kind of as though they're losing their power on people. People will be waking up. People will stop watching their reality television shows, and for a change, will take a walk in the wilderness and find out that they're divine, sentient beings that have the truest potential. And I think the cabal doesn't want this, and they'll do everything they can to prevent this. So if anything, it's going to have to come from within us as opposed to exterior, inside.
It's really coming from all around, though. It's really coming from all angles. It's not either or. It's not what Stephen said. It's not just what you said. It's not just what I think. That's the point, is that even both Stephen and I were making in the beginning, is that this change is coming whether people like it or not.
Well, let's be clear what I am saying. Okay,
mm-hmm.
Both things are happening simultaneously, not surprisingly. You have an emerging awareness amongst the general population in which each person is arriving at that moment of understanding where they realize, yeah, there's ETs here. We're not alone. And this process, it varies from person to person, but it's not driven in a vacuum. People read, they see documentaries, they contemplate, they talk to other people, right? It's not, spontaneous generation. But it is a populist process. And then you have another process going on within the governmental structures in which those who are in power are, in fact, moving towards getting this done. And, of course, within the power structures, there are competing interests, and there are those within these structures that oppose it, that would prefer to see this disclosure event put off. But there are plenty that want it done. It's not monolithic. There are those that think, it'll never happen because the oil companies won't let it. Like, the oil companies truly do run the world. Well, they don't. So it's a highly complicated process. There is no one cabal that runs everything. That sounds simple and it's convenient, but it isn't the case. There's vast numbers of competing interests, great power structures that don't even have the same agendas. But overall, the defined power structures that we know and the best, which are essentially the nation states, we know a lot about them, and we know a lot about how they operate and how they're built. And within nations, The process seems clear that commitments are being made within those structures to move towards disclosure. And so the two are coming together. Now, it's possible, and this concerns me, that it is possible that elements within the power structures could take measures to try to derail this process, basically terrorism. For instance, if I'm a member of a particular power structure and I oppose disclosure, and I had the means, I might smuggle a nuclear weapon into a country, Israel or the United States, and blow up a city and trigger chaos that could last for decades and essentially derail the disclosure process possibly. There's any number of things that people could do, they have the power to do them, that throw a monkey wrench into the process. Now, I'm not saying that couldn't happen. It could well happen. One of the reasons why that we need funding so desperately, we need advocate funding as soon as possible to get this done. Because the disclosure, once it's done, it's done. You can't undo it. And so once we get it out of the way, there's no more monkey wrench you can throw. It's done. We've moved into the post-disclosure world. So that's a reason for immediate funding as opposed to, well, it'll all work out. Let's just see how it goes. But this idea that there is a systemic opposition throughout the power structures that will prevent it, I believe is a mistaken idea. I believe that to the extent that you could define a systemic power structure, in the last 20 years it has shifted towards disclosure. And they're actually on our side, believe it or not. So we have the two coming together, which is why disclosure is very close. And barring somebody, some evil Dr. No type, doing something so awful that we all have to go off in the next 10 years and try to fix it or whatever else, or some cataclysmic event, disclosure should happen pretty soon. And that's the dynamic that I work under. The world is so big and so complicated that it is extremely tempting to try to reduce it to very simple ideas of single points of total control, but it isn't that way. And the world is too big and complicated to ever be that way. It is a mass of competing interests, and one of the key components, I believe, of aspects of the 21st century will be the emergence of populist need and technology like the Internet to create essentially citizen power structures where you actually have huge numbers of regular citizens coming together in collective power using the net to exert influence over governance and world structure. In other words, real competition, finally, with the banking centers, with secret societies, with nation states, and so forth, to shape the world. I mean, this is one of the most important, I think, aspects that we're going to see in the 21st century. Now, this could be taken away. They could shut the Internet down. They could come take our computers, whatever. But I wouldn't count on that happening. So in that sense, I have a mid-term optimism for the 21st century. Near term, I'm really concerned because what I see near term is very concerning and very upsetting. So near term, I'm very worried. Mid-term, I feel pretty good. Long term, who can go long term anymore? So near term, it's simple. We need the funding to get this truth embargo ended. And then I guarantee you plenty more funding will turn up after that will allow the citizen advocates to marshal citizen support for the reshaping of the world in the post-disclosure era. It won't be hard to get funding then, but it's getting across that line, that threshold of acknowledgement of the ET presence. This is the defining moment in human history to date. There may be a defining moment surpassing it down the line somewhere. I can't conceive of it right now, but it probably will. But in terms of to date, this is it, right? And so we really got ourselves a really unique opportunity here to affect history in ways that previous generations couldn't even imagine. Now the question is, will we seize that opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. I think those of us who are listening are definitely up for that challenge, and we're just about out of time here. So thanks, Steve, for spending this time with us, and hope to may have you on again sometime.
Absolutely. My website is paradigmresearchgroup.org. We're looking for new websites for the Exopolitics World Network, for the Exopolitics United States Network. We're looking for people to send more letters to the White House Press Corps through the fatsonwashington.org. I'm hoping to do a lecture series maybe soon at universities in the UK. We're trying to set it up now. And there are some conferences coming up. I'll be speaking at a conference in Lawrence, Kansas in March. Reykjavik Summit. I'll be speaking at the Pythagoras Conference in Louisville, Kentucky in November. And I am speaking in Mexico at a conference, or actually a small get-together in next week. So trying to get around the world. And again, I mentioned some books earlier. Read them, please. UFOs to the National Security State, ADF to Disclosure, UFOs and Nukes, UFOs by Leslie Kane, and also Kim Carlsberg's amazing art book on contact called The Art of Close Encounters. Great stuff, all recent books. You won't be disappointed. So until the next time, my friend, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and I look forward to just even in more depth this day. There's so much implications every way into that. It really takes like this to really have a sense of it all for everyone, really, and so that we can come to a consensus about what's speculation and what now can be verified and all these other things. So
sure,
it's great. It's great stuff. And thanks once again. And like I said, we'll definitely love you on in the future. So.
You're welcome. Until the next time. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. And thank everyone who was being in. Now, because they went over streaming. Thank you, caller. We didn't get a chance to. But we will catch everyone again in the show on Tuesday. We'll be to Albert Weller for a little while. And we'll see everyone next time here at the Universal Truth Evolution Blog Talk Radio channel. Thanks again, and look forward to the show as always. Thanks. Bye.